Hi, I am Monica. Welcome to my Spiritual Awakening show. Here, we explore ancient myths and their connection to our spiritual journey. We will talk about the story of Theus and the Minotaur and how it relates to the path of self-realization. Elias Stasinos is with us. Elias, what makes your channel or your teachings worth watching? There are so many others that teach similar ideas. Are you teachings better than other similar teachings?
Compare to other ones that completely diverge from the essence of enlightenment and liberation, such as the law of attraction that actually makes you more attached to the very things that keep you in darkness. Yes, my teachings are far better. Taken as a whole, it is not better from some of the most popular non-dual teaching channels. However, where there is a motive for profit, no matter how honest, some don't really want people to be enlightened and unsubscribe from their channel. So, as to the style of my teaching, it is better than most non-dual teachings because there is no profit motive. I know the subject very well from my studies, and I teach from experience. 36 years ago, I had a Kundalini experience, and later I became self-realized. I know that sounds like bragging, but it is just the simplest realization in the world and in this life. It is just the belief that we are the ego that clouds it. It is the so-called Maya that we cannot become self-realized. The Kundalini experience can happen to anyone, but nevertheless I had it, and that is how I started my spiritual journey to the present state of self-realization. Finally, perhaps it is my Juris Doctor's degree in legal science that made me more analytical. However, all good things in our lives are granted by the grace of the infinite. The essence of my teachings, however, is that I am not beating around the bush. I am teaching the truth through direct means. For example, there are a lot of channels teaching change of behaviors or beliefs. On this channel, we go to the root of it. We find the cause of suffering, the belief that we are the ego character, and teach followers to rid themselves of that belief. If followers realize that truth, the behaviors and convictions that create suffering gradually diminish because they are all connected to the ego imaginary character we believe we are. That process purifies the heart and mind. Jesus said that the pure in heart shall see God. The kingdom of God is inside us, he said. That is why many teach that we have to surrender. We have to surrender that ego character to become ready to be self-realized. Then, they just have to realize that they are consciousness, and they become free. They enter the kingdom of God, consciousness. So, going back to the Greek myth of Minotaur, it represents the struggle within us. Facing the Minotaur means facing our own fears found in the illusion of the ego hidden in subconscious patterns that are called samskaras and vasanas in Hindu philosophy. The Minotaur, with a human body and a bull's head, symbolizes inner turmoil created by the samskaras and vasanas.
Let's start with the basics. Can you give us a brief explanation of our purpose in the spiritual journey? Why do we suffer and never fully satisfied in this life?
Certainly. That's why I like Greek myths. I like them because they explain a lot in this life. For example, Homer said that we are not satisfied with anything. Odysseus had it all on Calypso's island, a beautiful woman that was a goddess, a nymph, Pallas, and his own private island. Even immortality. Calypso promised him that he would never die, but he was crying on the beach and wanted to go to Ithaca and be burned with the suitors. You know, it's a case of mistaken identity. We do not know who our true self is, and we suffer in this life. At the age of 2, we are still pure, and we perceive life directly, and without believing that we are separate from others, because belief is a thought or imagination in our mind. Babies don't have thoughts and imaginations, but from 2 to 6, our consciousness is identified with the thoughts and perceptions of parents, teachers, and society. They socialize us and give us a name upon which we build our social ego. That is, the personality and character we think we are. But this idea of self is just a mask to communicate with society. The true self we left when we were 2 years old, our consciousness, became identified with this mask, which is a collection of thoughts, names, and ideas of who we are. Our ego is simply that we have learned to be characters in our minds, what our parents, teachers, and society told us. Our consciousness, which is our true identity, has been identified with the ego character, which consists mainly of thoughts. So now, to wake up, we must understand that the ego character we think we are is just an illusion. We must recognize our true nature in order to realize ourselves and be freed from the illusion of the ego. Illusion does not mean that something does not exist. It means that yes, there is this identity in our mind, but it is just a mask to communicate with others in society. An information platform. It is just a story of thoughts in our mind regardless of whether the story is true. Everything happened, but we can't go back to the past or the future. By believing the narrative of who we are in our mind, we confuse the observer of those thoughts with the automatic movement and activity of the mind to think and create stories in our mind. So, whatever scenario our mind serves us, we believe it, and accordingly, we are happy or sad. This is why we suffer. It's why. But it's kind of hard to stop believing that there's a guy in our mind. This is because identification with the ego and its narrative has become a strong belief that the ego is our true self. It is a deeply etched impression, and it is the obstacle to awakening and enlightenment. It is simply a belief in our mind. A belief is nothing more than a thought, a fantasy. Therefore, what they call self-confidence, if it comes from our ego, all it does is undermine this self-confidence because most of our thoughts are negative. Not only that, but all thoughts, beliefs, and experiences are deeply etched into our subconscious. Thus, we are full of traumas, complexes, and patterns that, unless broken, we cannot see the truth of who we are. Thus, we suffer at the negativity and at the mercy of our mind's narratives. Certain teachings and practices must be followed to discover the truth. This is done by revealing the ego as an illusion. Then we will learn the other truth, that we are the awareness of our consciousness with direct experience of ourselves.
Interesting. Can you give us a brief explanation of how the myth of the Minotaur relates to our spiritual journey?
The myth of Theus and the Minotaur can be seen as a powerful allegory for our inner spiritual quest. The Labyrinth represents our mind. The Minotaur symbolizes our ego, which is part of our mind, and Theus embodies our true self on a journey of discovery and liberation. Let's start with the maze itself. This complex labyrinth represents our mind and psychic world, with all its twists, turns, and dead ends. It's easy to get lost in our thoughts, feelings, and established patterns, just as one can get lost in the maze. The Minotaur, half man and half bull, represents our ego. Born from the union of human and animal nature, it symbolizes the part of ourselves that is driven by primal instincts and self-centered thinking. The ego, like the Minotaur, can be a formidable obstacle to our spiritual path. Theus, our hero, represents the pure, awakened part of ourselves that is capable of overcoming the ego. His journey through the labyrinth mirrors our own journey into the depths of our soul.
There is a lot to analyze. How does this relate to the spiritual concepts of purification, enlightenment, and liberation?
Nice question. We can see this myth as a three-stage process, similar to the Orthodox Christian concept of purification, enlightenment, and deification. First, purification. This is represented by Theus's preparation for the journey. In spiritual terms, this can include practices such as meditation, self-reflection, or ethical living, all ways to cleanse ourselves of the challenges ahead. Then, the enlightenment. This is the moment when Theus confronts and kills the Minotaur, his ego. It is that aha moment when we see through the illusion of the ego and recognize our true nature. Finally, liberation or deification. This is represented by Theus finding his way out of the labyrinth. It is not enough to have a momentary one. Insight. We must incorporate this understanding into our daily lives and find our way back to our true selves. Ariadne, who provides Theus with the thread to find his way, can be seen to represent spiritual teachings or wisdom. Her love for Theus symbolizes our own desire for liberation. The thread itself is a critical element. It represents a continuous line of awareness that leads us back to our true nature. In practical terms, this could be a spiritual practice, a mantra, or simply the consistent effort to remain alert to our thoughts and actions. In the practice of meditation, we ask ourselves questions like, who is thinking this thought? It is like the thread that leads us to our consciousness, because in reality there is no thinker. Thoughts arise automatically from the activity of the mind. There is no little man thinking the thoughts in our minds. To think thoughts is the great deception of the mind. There is no one inside our mind. Only when we stop and are aware of the here and now and use our intellect, which is part of the mind, To analyze something, do we somehow think? But even these thoughts, if you analyze it deeply, are automatic from our subconscious and experiences. They are not our thoughts because there is no character who thinks. Other thoughts are automatic or unconscious. They are just thoughts that create the impression and sense of a self in our mind when there is nothing else but thoughts and images in our mind.
All of this is so rich in meaning. Do you have any practical advice for our listeners on how they can apply these ideas to their own spiritual journey?
Absolutely. Here are three main conclusions. The first is the purification of heart. Because the pure in heart will see God. Engage in practices that help clear your mind and emotions. This could be meditation, yoga, journaling, the wish they use on Mount Athos for mantra meditation, or any practice that helps you become more aware of your inner world. Then you must face your ego. Like Theus against the Minotaur, we must face our own egoic standards with courage. This includes honest self-reflection and a willingness to see our delusional ego clearly. Follow the thread. Maintain a consistent practice or focus that helps you stay connected to your true self, your awareness. This could be a daily meditation practice, regular self-inquiry, or simply cultivating moment-to-moment awareness. It's a journey. It takes time, patience, and persistence. But like Theus, with courage and the right tools, we can navigate the labyrinth of our mind and discover our true nature. Purification will be done by spiritual practice and honest living. Enlightenment will come when we understand that the ego is an illusion, and therefore we don't need to pay so much attention to our thoughts. That is, we must stop believing the scenarios and narratives that the mind serves us with thoughts and imaginations. In the end, we pass the thread and follow it to self-realization. That is, we continue to observe the trickery of the mind and slowly come to understand that we are not the ego in our mind, but the awareness of our consciousness within which thoughts and all human experience emerge.
Thank you very much. The discussion was incredibly insightful. For our listeners, we hope this mythic wisdom inspires you on your own journey of self-discovery. Until next time, may you find your way through your own mazes.
It was created by Elias Stasinos. Hit the like button and subscribe if you found the video helpful.